evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight for what is going to be a fascinating book chat with Alaskan Busch educator and author Angie Busch Alston. My name is Melody McAllister, and if this is your first time joining us tonight, or you join us every chance you get, I want to thank you. You can catch this live broadcast every Wednesday from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I want to especially thank Alice Keeler for giving us her platform for these broadcasts. Tonight, Angie is going to be discussing her new book called The Transplant Teacher, Looking Inward and Reaching Outward When You're Far From Home. I have absolutely loved reading it and reflecting on my own experiences as a transplant to Alaska. But this book could help anyone who is thinking about leaving their homes and embarking on a new adventure somewhere else in the world. Angie's book offers amazing advice from deep reflection that can help you survive, thrive, and form amazing community wherever you are hoping to go. So Angie, thank you for joining my book chat tonight. How are you? And tell us all about your background.
All right. Well, I am happy to be here. I am a high school teacher in Brevig Mission, Alaska, and that is a small Inupiaq Eskimo village about 86 miles north of Nome. And for people who are, from outside of Alaska, it's one of those places that there are no roads to Brevig Mission. You can only fly in, or in the summer you can boat in. So everything has to come in by plane or on boat, or I guess by snow machine in the winter. And I am married to the first grade teacher, and we have 3 kids. We have been in the Bering Strait School District for 16 years, just finished our 11th year in Brevig Mission and spent 5 in Shishmaref before that. And I primarily teach social studies, but because we live in a small school, sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's PE, technology, just whatever my students need to graduate, that's what I do.
That is amazing. And I got to attend the EST conference for the last 2 years. And so getting to meet all of these educators from Alaska, especially those who teach in the bush like you do, you wear so many different hats. And when you were preparing to leave here, and you talk about in your book how you had, you talk about the ignorance that you had, and you had all these high hopes. But did you realize all the hats that you would be wearing when you came here?
Well, I think I was more informed than most teachers who come out, because how we ended up in Shishmaref in the first place is from a friend from college. And she graduated a semester before me and went out to teach in Shishmaref. And then in the spring, she was instant messaging with my husband, who was my fiance at the time, and said, "Hey, we have 2 openings. Why don't you come up?" And so I had kind of a personal connection. So I asked her a million questions, and she, gave me some inside info. And so I knew probably more than most, but still not enough to be as prepared as I could have been. So I did go in knowing I would probably coach and advise a million different activities and teach a million different classes. And that definitely happened.
And I know I didn't prepare you for this, but what did your family think when you said you're going to move here? Or really, I'm in Anchorage. I'm kind of still in civilization. You're further away. What did they think?
We kind of had a split reaction. My parents thought it was awesome. My dad was getting out the globe and finding Shishmaref. And he was like, "I kind of wish we would have done something like this when we were young," and, all excited. And my future mother-in-law, on the other hand, she was like, "Oh, are you sure you really want to be that far away? That's awfully far. You could just teach closer." So we kind of had the opposite reactions. But I think everybody thought it would be kind of a short-term thing. Even we did. We went out for a 1-year adventure to earn some money and do something exciting. And it just turned into a real life for us, and, something that we that I really fell in love with. And that didn't happen right away, but it's, something that I've definitely grown into.
Yes. And I love, and talking about being there longer than you thought you were going to be. And I'm going to ask you this. So why did you decide, because it made me think of the deep roots connection that you made. So why did you decide to write The Transplant Teacher, and what gave you the idea of using the metaphor and organization of growing plants?
Okay, well, there is kind of a 2-prong answer to that question. One, we have been teaching in the Alaska Bush for 16 years, and we have seen a lot of teachers come and go. Some stay for a year, some stay for a couple years, some don't even make it past winter break. And they all have various experiences, and some are miserable, some are barely surviving, some are happy. But just with this constant coming and going. And I really love my community. I love Brevig Mission. And I think that the kids in Brevig Mission and the community of Brevig Mission, they deserve to have teachers who are happy and who are effective. And so if we can get teachers who are happy in their positions and happy in the community and connected to the culture and connected to the people and connected to the outdoors, then they're going to make friends, and they're going to have relationships, and they're going to be more effective in the classroom. And I think my community deserves that, but I also think teachers deserve that. And I think it's possible for teachers to do that in the Alaska bush and everywhere. I think teachers can thrive no matter where they are. And, I went from being miserable. I talk in the beginning of the book how I cried on my couch every day in Shishmaref for like the first 3 months. And that's not an exaggeration. Like my husband will totally vouch for that. Like I just was so discouraged. The expectations I had for my classroom and for myself just weren't meeting with reality. And I was constantly frustrated, and I blamed everybody around me for what was going on. It was the students' fault. It was the principal's fault. It was the community's fault. It was this, it was that, and so I just was miserable, but I moved past that. I kept going, and I kept learning and kept growing and adapting and changing, to fast forward to 16 years later where, now I'm raising my 3 children in the village, and I'm happy to be there. And I kind of had a sense as I was reflecting on my story that could be useful to other people, that if people could sit down and think about and be intentional about how they reach out to other people and how they reflect on their experiences, that they can be better teachers and happier. And I think happy teachers are better teachers, no matter where in the world you are.
Oh, I love that. And what I admire about your writing is that, and I told you this a little bit before, but you talk about the whole teacher. I totally agree with you. And I think most people that love kids would agree that they have that joy inside of them, which comes out when they're in the classroom as well. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that. You talk about the whole teacher, which is why I think that this is great for anybody that wants to take on an adventure, honestly, this is great for anybody that's in the classroom, getting to grow their community. And you even go as far as talking about spirituality. And I mean, all of the things that you include were amazing to me. We don't have enough time, but I feel like this might be a two-parter. This might be a two-parter for sure. But so what were some of the, what kept you going when you decided that, like, you even say that you thought you might not make it past Christmas break, but that contract, but what was the little thing too that just kept you going when you really wanted to give up?
Well, I can point to a very specific moment that was a turning point for me personally. And that was the last day of school before winter break, that first year in Shishmaref. And I had I just couldn't imagine trying to corral my students into doing more learning activities or this or that, or dealing with the resistance. And so I decided not to. And instead I asked them, I just sat and I said, what do you guys do for Christmas? What are the traditions around here? And Steve and I had been planning on staying in Shishmaref for Christmas, which was pretty unusual. Most teachers always spent Christmas break somewhere else with their families and things, but we were going to stay. And so they got all excited, and they started telling me about all the things they do over Christmas break. And they started talking about the Inupiaq games, and the leg wrestling and the stick pull and the wrist carry. And I was like, well, do you want to show me? And they were like, yeah. So we pushed all the tables to the side, and I got down on the ground with them, and they showed me how to play all these games. And I just got, right there with them, and we laughed, and I won some, I lost some. And there was, we used a broomstick for the wrist carry, where you have 2 people, one on each end, holding the stick, and then the person in the middle. So I was like there, let's see how, okay. And like the broomstick was right here. And then they lifted me off the floor, and I'm suspended by my wrist. And then they would walk forward to see how long I could hang on, being suspended by my wrist. Well, it didn't take long before the broomstick just cracked in half, just completely obliterated it. And so I fall down on the ground, and they thought that was so funny. Like they just laughed and laughed. And I have this great picture of myself like holding the, broken ends of the broomstick up. And I just really, really, truly enjoyed my students in that class period. And I had fun, and I learned about what they did and some of the traditions, and they interacted with me and they seemed to like me. And so I kind of got a taste of what was possible. And, not that those kind of moments happen 100% of the time in any classroom, because I don't think that's true. But I was like, you know what? It doesn't have to be miserable. Like, I can have more of these moments, and there's more things here in Shishmaref to offer and to enrich me. And I like that. And so then we stayed for winter break, and we participated in all the festivities and the games, and had kids crawling all over us, and we raced, and they cheered for us, and it was just so much fun. And it wasn't, things didn't become perfect once winter break ended and we were back in school, but things had shifted. Like, my mind had shifted where, I had seen Shishmaref at its best, and I wanted to be there, and I wanted to be part of it, and I wanted to experience, everything that I could. And that shift made a huge difference for me. And, still dealing with all the lows and the challenges, I still was able to hold on to what I had experienced and seek after more, because there is, in any community and any place, there are beautiful things, and there are wonderful things, and interesting things, and fascinating things, just waiting to be experienced. And so that's what did it for me, is that that magical Christmas experience.
I love that. And I'm glad for your honesty. It wasn't perfect, but you saw something that could be. And before I ask you to read, what was the idea behind the plant? I feel like we didn't get to that, but I love it. I loved how it's not just a pretty picture, guys. Like, the whole book is set up from like seedling to deep roots. I love that. What gave you that idea?
Okay. Well, it just seemed like such a natural metaphor as I was writing, and we hear the term in Alaska, a transplant to Alaska. That's a, pretty common terminology that's used as somebody who's moved from outside and come into the state. And so the idea that when you take a plant and you uproot it from one location and you move it over to another location, that can be kind of traumatic, whether it's a tree or a marigold or a teacher. Just the relocation is kind of a big deal on a plant. And so when you set it in its new home, you don't just like plop a plant down and like hope everything goes okay. First, you dig the hole and you take the rocks out and you put fertilizer in, and whatever else needs to happen, you do that first, and then you gently put the plant down, and then you take care of it really carefully for a while, because when plants are new and growing, they need tender care. And that's the same thing with teachers. Like, you're thrown into this new environment and things are really different, and there's culture shock, and there's all these new social norms, and there's probably some homesickness going on, and maybe some fear and overwhelm. Like, you need to treat yourself well, and you need to take care of yourself. And you can do that by building relationships and reaching out to people in the community and making connections, and finding people who will support you on your journey. And as you do that, you get stronger and stronger and stronger, and you grow, and hopefully you flourish. And then you send out these big branches and these deep roots, and maybe you bear fruit. Maybe you're a shade tree. There's all kinds of different roles that the plants play in our lives. And so it just really paralleled what I was trying to say. And then the phases too, in preparing the soil, the things you do before you land in your location, because that can be a pretty important phase before a teacher even comes out to the Alaska bush or anywhere else. And then when you're new, the nurturing the seedling when you're new in your community. And then once you kind of get established and things are going okay, you don't want to just stop there. Trees don't just stop. They send their roots down as deep as they can to be stronger and to get more nutrients and to widen their network. And that's, I think, an important phase for transplant teachers too, is to not just stay small and shallow, but to deepen and to strengthen and to reach out.
Wow, that's awesome. And you even have a chapter on like weeds, because at any time there could be those little
Yes.
negative things, you know. I just, it's great. And I want to say this out loud because I have read so many books lately, and I just want to share with everybody. You have the best introduction that I have read.
Yay!
I mean, like I was sucked in from the very beginning. So when I asked you to read, I was like, can you please read the beginning? Because I want to hear it in your voice. So we are now, I've asked Angie to read, and we're going to read at the very beginning. And I'm going to make sure that this is, I'm going to check that this is public so I'm not missing any comments while you read really quick.
Okay. So I'm just starting on page 1 of the Transplant Teacher. In 2005, I flew into an Inupiaq Eskimo village on a tiny island 20 miles south of the Arctic Circle in Alaska. New husband in tow, ready to take on the world as a first-year teacher. I had no trouble leaving the world of Idaho behind in a quest for a larger paycheck and an extraordinary life. My student teaching mentors referred to me as the student teacher who's been doing this for 20 years. I was an oft-requested substitute teacher, and I expected to sail through my first year of teaching with the same ease and success. Instead, I ended up crying on my couch alone every night the first 3 months we were in Shishmaref. My students hated my lessons. I couldn't get them to behave, and I felt useless as a teacher. I wondered what had happened to the teaching skills I thought I had. My husband wondered what happened to the happy girl he thought he married. Fast forward 12 years to a nearby village where I've lived and taught for 8 years. I'm still crying, but this time it's because of the news of the death of a dear friend. And this time, I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by my 8th and 9th grade students in a spontaneous group hug because I heard the news in their 5th hour class. I went from being a frustrated outsider to a supported member of the community. It wasn't the environment changed. It wasn't that my students suddenly became perfectly behaved. A wealthy benefactor didn't outfit my classroom with cutting-edge technology and resources. What changed was me. I'm Angie, the transplant teacher. I left everything familiar behind when I started my teaching career in the Alaska bush. For months, I was miserable as I resisted change. I blamed my unhappiness on everything wrong with the school, the community, and the administration. The schedule was too erratic. The materials were out of date. People didn't care enough about education. Policies were inconsistent. But I stayed, and I learned. I'm in my 15th year now. Our 1-year adventure turned into real life. I love my life in the village and my job at the school. I still have days when I want to give up and run away, but I think that's normal for all teachers. At least, I hope it is. I'm a different person than the one who set foot in Alaska for the first time in 2005. The key to my happiness and success has been turning inward to change my expectations and reaching outward to connect with my communities. I believe all teachers have the same opportunity, no matter where they land on their transplant journey. A transplant teacher is a teacher who relocates to teach in an unfamiliar environment. The environment might be across the country, across the world, or in a different part of their city or state. You might move into a new climate, a new language, a new population density, or all of the above. No matter where you choose to transplant, it's going to be different. But no matter the differences, successful transplant teachers simultaneously look inward to change themselves and outward to connect with their new communities to thrive in the classroom and beyond. In this book, I'll show you what worked for me.
I love that. Oh, I'm so glad that you read that, because it sounds amazing when you're reading that. And it's a great introduction. You know, I recommend this to everybody. I will be making a review because I love it. And what was your favorite part about writing this book?
Well, I think my favorite part of writing the book was going back through all of my old journals and all of my old emails and just remembering the stories, because 16 years is kind of a long time to look over a significant chunk of my life, at least, and to look back and to be like, oh yeah, I did that. And I even pulled up my old Flickr account and looked over my old photos that I had taken. and with my digital camera back before I had a cell phone that took pictures, and looked at and remembering the little moments and the little visitors that would come over to our house and just all of those stories. It was really kind of a beautiful reflecting experience for me. And also to see the growth in myself, and even just in the language I used in my emails, from referring to this Alaska thing. I think that was like a quote from one of my emails. Oh, this whole Alaska thing, that's what I was calling this. And now it's my life. Like I shifted into from temporary mode into more permanent mode, and this is my home. And also to look back and to see how I just really came in thinking things should be a certain way in a school and in a classroom and in a community, and that anything that varied from that ideal or those expectations was an aberration, was wrong, and that's not true. I'm a lot different now. I know that there's an infinite number of ways to conduct a classroom or a community or a family or a relationship. Just because there's a way that I'm most familiar with doesn't make that way the correct way or the right way or better than another way. And so just seeing my openness to new things and how I've integrated some ideas and principles into my classroom life and my personal life, and how I'm raising my children, it was just really kind of, wow, just a neat personal experience. And I feel really fortunate that I had those journals and the writing and the things to be able to look back at, to have those moments.
Yeah, the detail in which you describe when you first got here, even just thinking about coming and then actually being where you are, I was like, you have a great memory. So it's really cool for me to hear that you used journals, you went back. And I think for some people that are thinking about writing, that's just a cool way to start it, especially because you said you were starting this as a memoir and then it turned into something, a lot different.
Right. Right. So when I started writing the book in 2017, just as kind of, I felt like I had this story that I wanted to share. And so I started it just kind of as a book that, oh, this is what I did in Alaska. Here's my Alaska story. And as I wrote and as I worked and as I brought an editor on board and she started working with me, it kind of started to grow. And we started to realize, Leslie and I started to realize that there was something a little more profound than just, here's a bunch of stories of my Alaska adventure, that there were some lessons here and that there were some principles here that might help other people when they are on a similar journey, whether it be in Alaska or somewhere else. And that was really kind of exciting, and still is, to think that it's not just it's not just a little collection or a little scrapbook or something that's available for purchase on Amazon, but it's something that might be useful to other people, and it's something that might help people enjoy their lives as teachers more, because like I said, happier teachers, I really believe happier teachers are more effective teachers. And and the world needs more effective teachers. The world needs more happy teachers, and more teachers deserve to feel that way too.
Oh, I love it. I totally agree. And something to help you be happy, you've got quite a few checklists in there. And these checklists are to kind of help you to not be judging other people, whether it's the new community you're living in, yourself. Yes. These checklists are pretty powerful. Do you feel yourself going back to them?
Yes, I do. It's kind of funny. So I am very proud of the checklist. At the end of each kind of big section is a checklist, and it has signs of health or warning signs that you can look at to kind of gauge your health as a transplant teacher. And sometimes I will like find myself going through a little rough patch as a teacher, and then I'll be like, man, I need to not be a hypocrite. I need to be focusing on what I control, just like I say in my book. So there are things that I'll like, little phrases or things that I'll remind myself of. Oh, remember, you told everybody that when something like this happens, you have to focus on what you can control. And so I'll, kind of try to remind myself to do that. But also an interesting thing to note that these checklists are available. I made a PDF of the checklist, and you can get it on my website when you sign up for my mailing list. So if you just want to check out the checklists and see what those are all about, that's a really good way to do it. And it's formatted in a color version and a black and white, if you want to print it out or just have the digital one. But I am very proud of the checklist. Those are quite useful, I think.
They are. I love that you want to talk the talk. You put it out there on print. You got to live it. And I totally understand that. I love it. I feel that way also about anything that I wrote and I write. So how can people follow your work? And do you have I think you should keep writing, by the way. I didn't know, maybe you had other books out there, but there's a lot in here that I want to know more about. We'll have a conversation, but how can people follow you? Or what is the best way to follow you?
Well, I have a couple of ways you can. I have a website, thealaskateacher.com, and I keep a blog on there, and I have archives going back all the way to 2008. And so if you're interested in my story in Shishmaref, there's stuff about Shishmaref, there's stuff about Brevik Mission, there's stuff about childless Angie and Steve and their adventures, there's stuff about how adding the 3 children to our family and how we've grown in that way. That can be a good way. That's also where you can sign up for my mailing list. I am on Twitter also at the Alaska Teacher. And I'm not super active on Twitter. I am a little more of a lurker, but I'm trying to grow into that role and share more and interact. I've definitely connected with some very cool people that I've met on Twitter. And I also have an Instagram account. And all of the social links are on, if you go to thealaskateacher.com, right at the top, there's the social links if you're interested in seeing, pictures of Alaska. And I used to be really into photography. I had a nice camera and took great pictures. And so the website really does have some nice, if you're looking to get a look at some rural Alaska pictures, that's a good place to start.
Oh, yeah, I will check you out. I need to find you on Instagram. So that is so cool. And I do follow you, and I'm so glad that I'm following you. And so we are coming to the end. And I just want to say that I really, really, really enjoyed this book. And some of the things that you talked about that really kind of just resonated with me is just, again, the focus on the whole teacher, including your spirituality, because that's something that really matters to me. And it is hard when you go to a village. I can only imagine it because I live right outside of Anchorage. So I'm a little bit, I have a lot more at my fingertips than you do. But these are things that are important to people, and you've got to make do. And so you talk about how you have found that connection still. You talk about community connections, and I absolutely love that. Reserving judgment, practicing humility are things that they're just thematic through the whole thing. And whether you move to some faraway place or not, those are 2 themes in life that I think will get you very far. Your checklist, I love. And also, and we could get into this another time, but your trauma, or not your trauma, but you have learned living in a village where you are a white woman, you are an outsider. You talk about colonization and the trauma and the villagers that their history. You get into that history, and when you go somewhere else, learning the history of the people that you're serving is really important. And I was so glad that you were thoughtful to put that in here, because it is something, you kind of live in a place that seems like a foreign country, but you're still in the United States.
Right.
And I love how you put that and made it important. And so, but before we go, are there any last words that you would like to share with everybody watching?
All right. I think my parting shot is going to be some advice to any future transplant teachers out there who might be getting ready, to embark on their transplant journey, maybe have signed a contract to go somewhere new coming up in the fall. And 2 things. One is to be prepared to adapt your teaching to the needs of your students and to make what you teach relevant to their lives, not relevant to your life and your upbringing, but relevant to their lives and their upbringing. And also, don't just hang out with other teachers. Other transplant teachers have been a great support to me and have been great allies to me in my life and in my time in Alaska, but you are missing out if you never reach beyond that. If you never get to know the other people you work with, the people you live next to, the people that you run into at the store, that your life can be greatly enriched. And also your understanding of your transplant home and your understanding of your community will be greatly enhanced if you reach beyond just the teacher and school community to make connections.
That is beautiful, beautiful advice. And I'm going to flash the Amazon link really quick in the comments. This is a great book to read this summer with other teachers especially. And I just want to put that on there. And if you love the book, leave a review. That's how you show love to authors in your life. I will be leaving a review. Thank you all so much for joining. Angie, thank you for coming and joining my book chat. I hope that we get to do this again.
Thanks, Melody. Good night.
Yes. And good night to everybody. I'm gonna put some info. Oh, here I go. See all my technology things I have to but I'm gonna put I made a little outro so that if you love what you see, leave a review. Bye everybody. I'll see you next week.